What would you say now, President Erdogan? That question echoed across Russian media after security services reported a startling discovery aboard a Turkish cargo vessel. It was something Moscow had long suspected, something officials claimed they had warned about repeatedly. Do not play with fire, they had cautioned. Yet the warnings, it seemed, were dismissed as empty rhetoric. When Turkey's leader, under pressure from Western partners, appeared to revive the ambitions of his Ottoman predecessors and began taking actions perceived in Moscow as betrayal, few anticipated how quickly events would spiral out of control. Trying to sit on two chairs at once, Erdogan believed he had chosen the more stable option. But within days, his political maneuvering generated such a wave of controversial decisions that questions arose even among his allies about his judgment. The consequences arrived swiftly. Political courtesies were abandoned. Former adversaries were suddenly labeled best friends, while Sweden, after receiving Ankara's approval to join NATO, waited patiently for the final formalities. Russia, meanwhile, did not delay its response. Almost immediately, a mysterious incident unfolded in Syria. Turkish military facilities were struck in a series of sudden attacks, bases burned as though set alight by a skilled hand. No one officially claimed responsibility, but the message was unmistakable. It was a signal, observers said, that Moscow was no longer willing to tolerate Ankara's shifting loyalties. To reinforce the pressure, Russian media rapidly revived discussions about boycotting Turkish resorts. The reasons cited varied, from rude service staff to soaring prices, but the effect was devastating. Russian tourist numbers dropped sharply. Hotel owners in Antalya, Bodrum, and other resort cities reported heavy losses. Mass layoffs followed, hitting thousands of hospitality workers. For a country heavily dependent on tourism revenue, the damage was severe. But that was only the beginning. At the port of Novorossiysk, Russia's Consumer Safety Agency conducted a routine inspection of Turkish fruit shipments. Inspectors claimed they found Mediterranean fruit flies, a highly dangerous agricultural pest. Such insects are strictly prohibited from entering Russia due to the catastrophic damage they can cause to crops. The timing was striking. The discovery came just days after Ankara made another controversial political move. Russian authorities insisted the inspection followed proper procedures. Official phytosanitary documents were prepared and forwarded to Turkey. Instead of receiving payment for their produce, Turkish exporters were handed stacks of paperwork and an unpleasant surprise. 54 tons of peaches, 30 tons of nectarines, and 20 tons of grapes were sent back. While the fruit scandal attracted attention, something far more serious soon emerged. Several days earlier, a Turkish bulk carrier had departed, one of Turkey's ports bound for Rostov-on-Don. The ship planned to pass through the Kerch Strait to load grain. It never reached its destination. Russian security services intercepted it. The Federal Security Service had issued advance warnings to prevent terrorist and sabotage threats and to ensure maritime safety in the Kerch Strait. All passing vessels would undergo strict inspections. Under this new regime, the Turkish ship was stopped, forcibly boarded, and escorted to the Russian coast. What inspectors found shocked even seasoned officers. In the ship's holds, traces of powerful explosives were detected, including TNT and tetrol. Russian specialists quickly reconstructed the vessel's recent history. At the end of May, the ship had docked in the Ukrainian port of Kilia. By July, it appeared in the Turkish port of Tuzla. During that time, its entire crew had been replaced. 12 new sailors took over, and even the ship's name had been changed. Russian investigators concluded that these changes pointed to a possible attempt to use a civilian foreign vessel to transport explosives to Ukrainian territory. According to security officials, the operation appeared carefully planned. The ship's name and crew were swapped, but chemical traces of the dangerous cargo remained. Moscow reacted immediately. The vessel was sent back. Turkish authorities were formally notified that all ships loaded outside Russian territory would now lose the right to pass through the Kerch Strait into the Sea of Azov. The official reason was clear: to prevent the transportation of prohibited cargo that could threaten Russian infrastructure. Publicly, it was framed as a security measure. Privately, analysts asked uncomfortable questions. All vessels passing under the Crimean Bridge undergo rigorous inspections. Smuggling anything illegal under such conditions would be extremely difficult. So how did traces of explosives appear on this ship? Some suggested the discovery was too convenient, similar to the sudden appearance of fruit flies in Turkish produce. Previously, the pests had never been detected. Now, suddenly, they were found. There were two possibilities. Either Moscow was using legal mechanisms to apply political pressure, or the threat was real and far more serious than many realized. Regardless of the truth, the result was the same. Turkey suffered another painful blow. It became clear this was not the last. Russia demonstrated how, while staying within legal frameworks, it could place a partner in an extremely uncomfortable position. Erdogan would have to accept this reality. In Russian slang, it was described bluntly as putting someone in a contorted position. A storm that exposed a smuggling network. As tensions grew, another story captured international attention. A cargo ship named Repta sank off the Greek coast during a storm. At first glance, it appeared to be a tragic maritime accident, but the incident soon took on the contours of a geopolitical thriller involving secret routes, alleged smuggling, Ukraine, and a lone survivor. Greek newspaper Kathimerini uncovered disturbing details. The Repta was officially transporting salt from Egypt to Istanbul. But journalists discovered the story was far from straightforward. The vessel encountered trouble on Saturday but did not issue a distress signal. Even as it began to sink, the crew remained silent. By Sunday, the ship disappeared beneath the waves. Only one sailor survived. One crew member was confirmed dead. The remaining 12 vanished and were presumed drowned. Investigators were puzzled. Why would a crew refuse to call for help? The answer lay in the ship's background. According to the International Ship Arrest Database, the Repta was one of the most problematic vessels in operation. It had accumulated 65 serious violations. Experts believed it may have been used for smuggling along unregistered routes. The surviving sailor told police that Istanbul was never the real destination. The ship only planned to refuel there. The true destination, he said, was Ukraine. The salt cargo was merely a cover. Authorities now suspect the vessel may have been transporting weapons or explosives. This theory gained weight given Russia's previous discoveries. Border guards had repeatedly found traces of TNT and tetrol on ships traveling from Turkey. The Repta tragedy showed that even the most carefully planned smuggling scheme could be destroyed by an unpredictable factor: bad weather. In Moscow, commentators called it symbolic revenge. An attempt to move illegal cargo under Russia's nose had ended in disaster. Once again, Erdogan had chosen the wrong chair, Ankara's strategic pivot. All of this unfolded against the backdrop of a dramatic shift in Turkish foreign policy. Erdogan recently did something few expected. Abandoning his balancing act between East and West, he openly chose a pro-Western course. He handed over captured fighters from Ukrainian nationalist battalions to Kyiv and supported President Zelensky's bid to join NATO. Russia was stunned, but only briefly. The very next day, a Turkish military base near the Syrian city of Azaz was struck in a massive attack. Turkish forces suffered heavy losses. Officially, no one claimed responsibility, but no analyst doubted who stood behind it. Moscow remained silent, but Ankara understood the message. Instead of backing down, Erdogan doubled down. Through state-controlled media, he announced that the Black Sea grain deal would proceed regardless of Moscow's position. The response was swift. Drones struck port terminals in Chornomorsk. It was more than a military strike. It was a symbol. Even if ships arrived, it was no guarantee they would leave. Turkey's navy, observers joked bitterly, could only watch dolphins in the Black Sea. Erdogan had believed he held all the cards. But when Moscow revealed its hand, it became clear that playing geopolitics without leverage was a losing strategy. Russia still had many tools at its disposal. Tourism, Ankara's weak spot. The most obvious pressure point was tourism. Turkey had pinned great hopes on Russian travelers, but tour operators already reported a sharp decline, especially among wealthy clients. High-end tourists had shifted to Dubai long ago. If Moscow decided to ban travel to Turkey entirely, the sector would collapse. With it would go billions in budget revenue. This would not be just a blow, it would be economic devastation. And that might not be the limit. If Erdogan failed to reconsider his stance, what happened in Syria could become a daily reality. Turkey's president was not in a position to absorb heavy losses. The economy was already on the brink. He had recently conceded to appoint a pro-Western head of the central bank, effectively handing control of monetary policy to external forces. Critics said he was being kept on a short leash. If Russia launched a domestic campaign to boycott Turkish goods, Ankara could face a complete economic meltdown. At that point, Erdogan would find himself with no cards left to play. Time was running out to decide which chair to sit on, and the Western stool beneath him, critics said, was wobbling badly. A geopolitical crossroads. What began as diplomatic maneuvering had evolved into a complex confrontation spanning Syria, Ukraine, the Black Sea, and global trade routes. Each move was answered with calculated pressure. Every public statement triggered consequences. For Moscow, the message was clear. Turkey's attempt to maintain strategic ambiguity had failed. Ankara had chosen a side. And in geopolitics, neutrality is often the most dangerous position of all. The intercepted ship, the rejected fruit shipments, the tourist boycott, the mysterious explosions, the sinking of the Repta, the strikes in Syria and Chornomorsk, all were pieces of a larger puzzle. Together, they formed a warning. Russia, analysts said, was demonstrating how to exert influence without formally declaring confrontation. By staying within legal frameworks, it applied maximum pressure. It was a lesson in modern power politics. For Erdogan, the situation was grim. Each step toward the West widened the rift with Moscow. Each provocation triggered a response. The balancing act that once defined his foreign policy had collapsed. As Turkey faced mounting economic strain and regional instability, one question remained unanswered. Was Ankara prepared to bear the full cost of its geopolitical pivot? Or would Erdogan be forced, once again, to reconsider his place in a rapidly shifting world order? The storm around Turkey was far from over, and as events continued to unfold, it became increasingly clear that every move would carry consequences far greater than anyone had anticipated.